Hello and welcome to another chat. Let's talk about situation in the Black Sea and what might develop in the near future. Obviously, the world is focused a lot on possibility of peace talks. President Trump likes to be the center of this sort of thing. Thousands of miles away from Washington in the Black Sea, there are real world things happening that I think very possibly, probably more likely to happen than peace. And even if there are peace talks, this concern is it's likely to uh, happen anyway. Start with a video that Ukrainian Navy put out just a couple of days ago. It shows a Ukrainian Navy diver. Pretty cool. The nature of underwater photography, it's very hard to see what's going on here. But if we change the contrast, there's a diver on the right approaching a naval mine in the Black Sea. Very brave guy, balls of steel. Hats off to clearance divers or EOD, so explosive ordnance disposal divers around the world. I think this is very significant, and I want to talk about what the implications are in the coming days and weeks. Something to watch out for. I don't like making predictions, but this is what I'm expecting to happen, or I think there's a high likelihood. I am H.I. Sutton. I'm an independent defense analyst. I focus on unconventional naval warfare, use primarily open source intelligence, find me on social media, my website, hisutton.com, and so on. Usual caveats, this is unscripted, unedited. I've thrown together some slides. I was going to do a written article, but I thought it'd be quicker to do YouTube. Probably not. It was a lot of work to put the slides together. Haven't rehearsed this, just let's get on with it. So this is the object in question. It's a bomb, as you can see. In fact, we know it's a CAB 500. We can ID it from that. And that's a pretty common Russian bomb. The most common version or the most notable version is the glide bomb equipped or glide kit version. You see it here under the wing of a Russian aircraft. The wings pop out and it can glide 40, 50 kilometers. So this is a pretty large bomb, 450 kilograms warhead. But what's significant is that the bomb dropped into the Black Sea had a mine fuse. Basically it's designed to blow up under ships. Now, we're pretty used to naval mines, and you probably picture something like this. And in the war between Russia and Ukraine, there have been quite a few instances where naval mines have strayed into, drifted into Romanian waters, like these ones. And they're typically Soviet era anti-invasion mines. They're meant to be more to the bottom, but they break free in a storm or whatever, and they float around the Black Sea. Following the currents, they reach Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, maybe. Again, clearance divers, balls of steel there. Great guys. Just as an aside, you'll notice the top right, the horns, those things that stick out are a little bit fatter. That's because someone forgot to take the safety nets off or safety caps off them. They're meant to look like the one on the left. If you move those horns, they've got chemicals in and they'll explode. The mine will blow up and blow you to smithereens, of course. Now, those floating mines are actually not that dangerous to modern merchant ships. When they break free, they float along. Here's just a graphical representation. The actual mine would be much smaller in relation to a ship in reality, but you wouldn't be able to see it. So there's the mine floating along, and they hit the front of the ship. The ship typically just sails into them. And the combination of the fact that their warheads are quite small, about 20 kilograms, the fact they're hitting the front of the ship where there aren't very many people, there's not much cargo, it's about the least dangerous that you can get to a merchant ship. Now, I don't think anyone's volunteering to sail into mines, but consequently, they don't sink ships. And there's actually been quite a few ships that have been hit by these mines, and you probably haven't heard about it unless you're really close on the naval topic. Bottom mines are very different. Um, they sit on the seabed and they blow up underneath the ship. They also tend to be much larger, at least the ones we're talking about here. Not as a principle, no reason they could be smaller. Of course, there are smaller types, but the bomb we're looking at is a 450 kilogram warhead versus say 20 kilogram of an anti-invasion floating mine. So the floating mines, the hitting ships are much smaller, and they go off underneath the ship. potentially they could lift a ship and drop it and break it and so on, but probably just make a very big hole in the bottom of a ship, sink it. They're worse in shallow water. Actually, there's a depth of water where, you know, the however big the explosion is, it's probably not going to be big enough to sink a ship by the time it reaches it. But the Northwest Black Sea is not that type of water. It's incredibly shallow where these mines are being laid and where the ships are sailing over them, tens of meters less. And so this is sort of thing that can sink ships. I haven't really put it to a test. I don't think anyone's volunteering again, but if one of these goes off under a ship, it will make headlines in the way that those small floating mines don't. Now, the mine did go off, but fortunately it was a controlled explosion, no ships overhead. Where was it laid? We don't know. It was not publicly revealed where or when, but I would guess it's probably somewhere around Snake Island. It's quite logical because that's on the shipping lanes to Odessa and other Ukrainian ports. I've just drawn these lines representative, but of course the Russians will know exactly where the ships are going. And they can lay mines close to Romania and blockade all the ports and be as sort of the safest locations to do it. It's furthest away or the fewest Ukrainian defenses. The mines are interesting as well. Um, Russia has in its inventory a lot of types of bottom mine. These include the UDM-3, which is an air-launched one, can be launched from flying boats, things like this, and the MDM-1, which is a more modern, larger mine that's typically laid by submarines, but can be laid by service vessels or even by air. And the warhead on the one on the right can go up to over a ton of explosive TNT explosives equivalent. The actual weight's probably less than a ton, but it's it's more powerful than TNT. So that's ginormous. And Russia definitely has these in inventory and could be laying them. But the mine that we've actually seen is a bit different. It's basically an air-launched glide bomb with a mine fuse. This is incredibly similar in concept to the quick strike weapon used by America. I don't think it was publicly known. I didn't know that Russia had such a capability, but it's not surprising. It makes a lot of sense. The magic, of course, is in the glide kit. That's what differentiates it because it allows a standoff launch. Russia actually laid quite a few of these in 2023, late 2023. I think by memory it was about all October that it was reported, but that's going by memory, so don't quote me on that. But in December, a fencer jet was shot down somewhere near Snake Island and it stopped. I think the fencer was probably laying mines, and it was deemed too dangerous. None of their mines had an effect. Probably they didn't lay them in exactly the right place. Probably some luck involved, but also the good news I'd say for ships is that couple of years later, those mines probably not still active. Definitely still dangerous, but not their fuses will probably have expired. So what? Why am I going on about mines? Well, I think it's increasingly likely that Russia will lay more bottom mines and that they could start hitting ships. Why? I think that well, firstly, the video looks quite recent. We don't know when, but it might be a recently laid one, so maybe they've started again. But also, if they haven't, I think there's every motivation that they will. What will have changed, what enables it compared to when that fencer was shot down, is that the range of glide bombs is generally getting further. They're getting better. There's new types such as this one. Um, these are being used in Ukraine. They're actually much smaller, only 100 kilograms. Um, but one glide bomb, unspecified type, was reported just this morning. I saw a note that had been observed flying 130 kilometers versus, let's say, 40 kilometers for the typical original first generation CAB glide bombs. So there's a real worry that Russia will have found ways to make the CAB 500 go further and or might take more risks in laying them again. And both will contribute to more mines being laid off Odessa. Why would it do that? Well, to stop grain ships. in the sort of approach to a peace negotiations, it's typical both sides will look to gain advantage. Russia has been hoping to stop Ukrainian exporting grain to the world, while at the same time avoiding Ukraine stopping Russia from exporting grain. Um, there was the grain initiative in between July 2022 and 23 that expired. Since then, Russia's been trying to stop grain exports, quite unsuccessfully, I'd add, but that'll be because their risk appetite. The first thing they did that was visibly different was after the finishing of the grain initiative, a week later, say they boarded a ship using a helicopter from patrol ships. That didn't seem to work. They only did that once, and there have been occasions since then that Russian missiles have hit ships. In November 2023, a merchant ship was hit in Odessa with a Krypton anti-radiation missile. I think the narrative at the time, but my assessment as well, I think everyone's view was that missile was probably not intended to hit the ship. It just homed in on the ship's radar. It was intended probably for air defense systems in Odessa itself. And then in September 24, um, there was a grain ship hit by a much larger anti-ship missile, an AS-4 Kitchen in the Black Sea. Didn't do as much damage as many people would have expected, but if you think about it, a grain ship is basically a big bucket of grain or sand. Grain sand, pretty similar, right? If you ever been to a rifle range, you know you've got those buckets of sand, and you shoot your rifle, machine gun, whatever it is, into that bucket, and it's going to save it, even a heavy round. The grain ship is essentially a giant one of those, and even an AS-4 missile, which is ginormous, carrier sinking missile, doesn't have that much effect in a grain ship. I think that that was also an accident, although clearly a very high risk. An accident was waiting to happen. They were probably shooting at Snake Island, and the missile homed in on the ship instead. Um, that also changed the pattern of activity. They stopped firing AS-4s as frequently at Snake Island. Also, throughout this whole time, there have been frequent systematic attacks on Ukrainian ports, including grain storage. So Russia really wants to stop grain ships, but they've been trying to do it in ways that doesn't incur Ukraine doing the same to their grain ships and other merchant vessels for that matter. They could just sail their navy out. Although the navy's hiding in Novorossiysk, it still has the capability to sail out and sink any grain ship almost at will. Same with its aircraft, of course. Probably an easier way to do it is with aircraft. But it would be very transparent and not look good optically for their peace talks, and would encourage Ukraine to return the favor. So they're looking at ways to stop the grain shipments without escalating to Ukraine being in a position to start attacking their grain ships. And mines allow them to do that. Mines are a type of deniable weapon. Even though we know this mine, we say, oh, that's Russian. If a mine goes off underneath a ship, Russia would have plenty of space to say, hey, no, that's a Ukrainian mine, a floating mine. Remember, most media, most politicians don't know the difference between floating mines, the tiny ones that we're talking about, and these ship sinking types of weapon. And even if they did, there's plenty of space for Russia with misinformation to muddy the water and to say, oh, it was a Ukrainian mine or one that was laid much earlier or whatever. Hey, that's my point. I think that the likelihood of Russia laying mines is going up, and they might sink ship. Um, just a bonus extra, if you still got a couple of moments, the video, seek it out, but you'll notice that the guy is carrying something unusual, some specialist equipment. I think that is a Shark Marine Navigator product from a company called Shark Marine. Just a quick ID. I mean, by eye, the video on the left, and then the reference image on the right is Shark Marine Navigator. Recognize what that is. The Navigator is basically a handheld sonar imaging tool and navigation system. These are some stills from it. If anyone knows, if I If I've misidentified that device, let me know. Um, but look them up; they're pretty cool. Significantly, they're safe to approach a sensitive mine underwater. You don't, think about the fuses on those mines. You don't want to set them off with whatever you're carrying. So these are expensive, sophisticated systems. Okay, thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, say unedited, unscripted. Thank you.